The Dune franchise under Legendary and Warner Brothers so far has appeared to take a cautious, step-by-step approach, as each sequel film has only received the green light after the prior one had been released for some time. Many Dune fans have long hoped for big screen adaptations of Frank Herbert's sequels, particularly up to and including God Emperor of Dune. However, reports of major issues at Warner Brothers have raised concerns among insiders, not just about the future of franchises like Dune, but about the studio itself, which is apparently on the brink of total collapse. So this is something that's kind of interesting to watch unfold, is the sluggish box office after the release of Mickey 17. So this was an article from Variety kind of lamenting that no one's going to the theaters, and Mickey 17 really just did not do well its opening weekend. And because of that, there's also these rumors going around that people at Warner Brothers are very concerned. I think the rumor is that Warner Brothers is set to take a loss of $100 million from Mickey 17. It just completely flopped. In its second weekend, Jack Quaid's Novocaine came out, and it had like a $10 million debut, cheap action thriller. This was its second weekend and already dethroned Mickey 17. It's not strange, honestly, when you think about it. I was actually very intrigued by Mickey 17 with its premise of kind of this crappy version of immortality. And it sounds like one of the major points of contention for the movie is that it's very caricature, very screwball, dark comedy. They just announced it was hitting streaming within like 18 days of its release. So that's another thing. If these films don't do well, they go to streaming so fast. So if you're not sure you're going to like a film, the climate is the way it is to expect that films are just going to hit streaming soon anyway. So why not just wait and see it at home? And if you end up liking it, okay, you'll watch it. But if not, you'll change the channel, all within the comfort of your own home. But the fallout from it has people nervous. Ticket sales declined from 55% to 60% from its $19 million debut. Second weekend revenues were $8 million to $9 million. The dystopian sci-fi comedy has generated $20.5 million domestically, $54 million globally. It now has gotten to the $90 million mark worldwide, but it cost $118 million to produce, and according to these numbers, they're expecting it has to make $275 million to $300 million worldwide to get into the black, to break even. Mickey 17 actually, I think it cost way too much for what it is, which was definitely a very experimental film. It's from Bong Joon-ho, who's, I would say, an art house director, in that his films really aren't made for the mainstream audience. They are very niche. And Parasite did extremely well. It won an Academy Award for Best Picture, but it also was very cheap to make. But other movies that he's made really haven't drawn in those huge audiences. So it was a very risky gamble for Warner Brothers. I'm actually surprised that they greenlit it. And there was talk too that they had their own version of the film that tested better with audiences, but that they decided to go with Bong Joon-ho's vision. His final cut was the one that was released. Unfortunately, that's just not sitting well with people who have seen it. It sounds like it was too experimental, I guess, for a lot of audiences. But I was interested in the sci-fi concept, and because of that, it makes me wonder if there's any hope for a God Emperor adaptation. But now that Warner Brothers really lost their shirts on this, it's set to take a loss of $100 million from that movie, Mickey 17. And now this is an article from Slash Film, why James Gunn's Superman has the power to save or destroy an iconic movie studio. They are not in the best position. Warner Brothers themselves has already lost so much in previous projects, the projects that were lingering from the prior DC films that bombed, and they're rebooting this whole thing and setting up a new expanded universe, but they still had to release those previous films that they already had made and were in production, and all of them underperformed or bombed. It's interesting that they decided to take such a leap on Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17. It sounds like maybe they were thinking of getting critical acclaim that would lead to Oscar wins or something like that, because you have a director who's won I like the idea of them greenlighting it, something that's weird and strange and different, something that may resonate with certain people. I think it just cost way too much than it had any right to. And that was the problem. They had significant delays that ended up costing it more significantly. And they spent $80 million on the marketing alone. That's crazy to spend that much. And they definitely overspent in the budget of the film for something that was very not for the mainstream and very experimental. So this was the latest edition of the Puck newsletter written by industry veteran Kim Masters. It said that there is trouble afoot over at the offices of Warner Brothers, and the theatrical performance of its remaining movies this year, especially Superman, may go a long way towards deciding the future of the studio. After the initially disappointing returns from Mickey 17 this past weekend, the heat is getting turned up on the studio chairpersons Micah DeLuca and Pamela Abdy. The Puck report mainly focuses on rumors concerning their tenure at Warner Brothers and whether they might end up being the next high-profile casualties of infamously trigger-happy CEO David Zaslav. Although much of this has to do with the exorbitant budgets handed out to various movies under DeLuca and Abdy's leadership, it mainly comes down to the shareholder perception of Warner Brothers' library of IP and the potential of the brand to succeed where others have failed. And that's where Superman comes in. DC has rarely found itself at a bigger crossroads in live-action history, which means the pressure is squarely on Gunn and co-studio head Peter Safran to get this blockbuster to fly high in every sense of the word. Where Superman goes, it increasingly looks like Warner Brothers as a whole will follow. Warner Brothers has always bet heavily on the financial prospects of its crown jewel DC franchise, but it's safe to say the stakes have never felt higher than they are now. The internal concerns currently unfolding within the walls of the studio aren't directly a result of the critical flops and box office disappointments of various DC movies in recent years. Looking at you, Blue Beetle, Black Adam, and especially the misfiring sequel, Joker Fully Adieu. Wasn't there another one, the Flash movie? And the Shazam sequel? Didn't that also flop? That's a lot of underperforming and box office bombs. I guess the heart of the matter is Warner Brothers' approach, and that's how the article continues, that on paper, investing hundreds of millions of dollars to original projects such as Bong Joon-ho's sci-fi epic Mickey 17, Maggie Gyllenhaal's star-studded Frankenstein production The Bride, Paul Thomas Anderson's upcoming $100 million film starring Leonardo DiCaprio, the Ryan Coogler-directed Sinners, and more is actually great news for the state of the industry. It's less than ideal, however, when the hefty budgets on each of those titles requires a return on investment that already feels questionable, to say the least. That's definitely a factor of your approach to these films, but that's not to say that you shouldn't greenlight those projects or that they're not interesting and that can find a fan base. But it should not have cost $118 million and an $80 million marketing budget. That seems crazy too. I mean, I'm all for definitely marketing your film. That's important, but that seems a bit much. And I think maybe it was because it was such a grand scale film. It is a science fiction film, so there's a lot of VFX, a lot of money having to be invested in making it look good. Definitely a questionable approach to this. So now it's all on Superman. Superman may be what depends on if God Emperor gets made. If there is ever a God Emperor of Dune, I think it's very iffy at this point. Children of Dune is iffy. But now with Warner Brothers in the state that it is, do you think that they'll just go the safe route on all of these things? At least Dune is an IP, so maybe it will have that chance. They'll give it that chance, and especially if Dune Messiah continues the trend of performing well at the box office. I think actually Dune Messiah will depend a lot on its future if they want to continue it, and also Superman. But Superman is what they're hinging all of their hopes on. So for us Dune fans, Superman has to do well if we're even going to have a chance of seeing God Emperor ever. It can't hurt for Messiah to make at least as much as Dune Part 2 made. It has to make that, but I'm sure it would help if it also made a bit more as well. But I think Warner Brothers is part of the problem in its distribution, in that they also send things to streaming very prematurely. You also have contributed to this landscape where audiences just expect things to come to streaming within a month or less. So if money's tight and they're not sure if they're gonna like a certain film, it's so easy to just be more selective with the movies you choose to go see in theaters. And for the stuff that you're not sure about, well, just wait a few weeks till it comes out on streaming. You've aided that expectation from your customers, potential customers, by rushing things to streaming so fast. Dune Part 2 came to streaming, I think, on video on demand within 6 weeks after its release. It was available on Twitter. Someone leaked it on Twitter that day, because that's another concern. If you release something on streaming, you're also making it subject to piracy. It is what it is. It's a real thing that people have to acknowledge and realize happens. I think that definitely is the heart of the matter of what your approach is to the industry itself and your handling of these different projects. When it comes to these franchises like DC, we're telling you what we want. The customer is telling you what we're going to support. They just haven't listened. And unfortunately, it's taken like several flops for them to be so desperate. And so now this is the information that's making everyone so nervous. It says, after citing several insiders with a rather pessimistic outlook of Warner Brothers' 2025 slate of movies, the Puck article finally gets to its juiciest tidbit. The basic gist of it: Superman needs to perform well among general audiences. If it doesn't, we could be looking at a very different version of Warner Brothers in a shockingly short amount of time. To quote directly from the Puck, meanwhile, Gunn and Safran are busy with a little project of their own, Superman, the July release that has now taken on almost incalculable importance to Warner Brothers Discovery. If Warner Brothers can't finally make the DC franchise work, there is genuine fear that the studio will go the way of 20th Century Fox, which was swallowed by Disney in 2019. That's just crazy, though, to consider that Warner Brothers is in this position. They're a studio that has such a long history, and to now be reduced to this point, honestly, I think it's just a problem of their own making. You've done this. You've consistently made, especially when it comes to DC, subpar films. Just because you made a big budget movie, that in itself doesn't mean that audiences will go to see it. If there's this pattern of declining quality in storytelling, then that's what they know to expect. And, with Disney's Marvel is a similar position. Captain America cost a lot. The Captain America Brave New World, I don't think it's going to make $400 million, and that definitely means it's not going to break even. So that's another problem too, is these original films that are seeing the same budgetary concerns. These original experimental films need to be produced on a smaller budget. They're not for the masses, for the mainstream. They are very much for a niche audience, and so therefore needs to be scaled down with that box office projection in mind. I think a lot of these projects you could probably do on a smaller budget, even science fiction. If the story is good, then you'll find your audience. The same thing with these overblown budgets, though, of these superhero movies. There's just been this consistent pattern of concentrating on spectacle, which has become a decline in that as well, actually. You see movies that have come out 20 years ago that look better. Jurassic Park still holds up, but a lot of these VFX artists, they're just overworked, and they have to pump out these projects within very short deadlines, and then the final product speaks to that. So they don't even look good, but they are definitely concentrating on spectacle over substance. If you have that pattern of bad storytelling, you're going to lose your audience. This is a definite wake-up call. It should be for Warner Brothers. It is unfortunate what happened with Mickey 17, but at the end of the day, I just think it was very mismanaged. It shouldn't have cost so much. They should have scaled down the marketing of it. I don't think you needed this full-blown event at CinemaCon and the like. I think it should have been embraced as what it was, which is kind of an art house film, something that's very experimental and strange. They had the wrong approach to begin with. And then on your more expensive projects, these blockbusters that can draw those big audiences, you have to give them a cinematic experience worth the price of admission. Just because you created this film that cost $300 million, or the most expensive, but do nothing in terms of the story, ultimately people are going to learn that it's not worth it, because that's what's most important to audiences. So a lot's riding on Superman. Hopefully they can turn things around. Ultimately, just listen to your customers and pay attention to the ever-changing landscape of the box office and the theater industry. But at the end of the day, you make a good story and it looks like you're going to have an entertaining time at the theater, then you'll have that audience. Make well-written films. That's across the board, whether it's an indie film or your big budget blockbuster. Well-written films will draw those audiences, and then keeping those films in theaters longer. This is something Warner Brothers especially needs to learn. Their distribution model is awful. They are a significant contributor to why the audience expects all of these films to go to streaming so soon. And that's why I was hoping that for Dune Messiah, they can negotiate a better deal, because I know Villeneuve wants it. I know Villeneuve would want Dune Messiah to stay in theaters for as long as it possibly could. But this was just how the negotiation worked out with both Legendary and Warner Brothers. But these are self-inflicted wounds. This is the bed that Warner Brothers made for themselves. For the sake of the future of sci-fi on the big screen, please learn your lesson, Warner Brothers. It's insane that you had to put yourselves in this position to learn this lesson, that now you are scared of being consumed or being bought because you couldn't just listen to your customers in the first place. Because they have Dune, it makes me worried for it. Can't help it. Hopefully this is a wake-up call. Don't just pump out content. Make something good for your audience. Like, have the Tom Cruise approach. He loves making films. He wants the theater experience to thrive. He wants to make something people will want to see and enjoy. So have that outlook. I think that's the long-term solution. Whether or not that will happen, I have no idea. But in the short term, if these reports are to be taken seriously, then Dune fans who want to see a continuation of the theatrical Dune series into God Emperor should be hoping that Warner Brothers is able to turn things around, starting with James Gunn's Superman. And no doubt, if Denis Villeneuve's Dune Messiah performs better than the previous 2 films at the box office, then the prospects of getting more big-screen adaptations of Frank Herbert's Dune saga will be much brighter. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on these reports of insiders expressing concern about Warner Brothers following their recent string of flops. Do you agree with my take on the major issues big studios like Warner Brothers are creating for themselves and the need for a fundamental shift in how they approach both art house films and big budget blockbusters? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more sci-fi and fantasy news, theories, and lore. And if you're looking for other ways to support the channel, you can leave a super thanks or join as a YouTube member for early access to new videos and other perks. You can also check out my Patreon page for exclusive content. Thank you all so much for your support. And as always, have a very nerdy day.